want to emphasize today is that sitting in this room is an inspiring and profound group of Pakistani Americans, many who have traveled from afar to join us today for this very special conversation on the U.S. and Pakistan. Mala's mission has always been to celebrate the freedoms and democratic values this country has provided for Muslim Americans to thrive and lead in their respective domains. So today's conversation comes at a crucial time in global politics against the backdrop of the UNGA, with an esteemed panel featuring Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi, Ambassador Robin Rafal, the Honorable Elizabeth Horst from the U.S. State Department, and even our moderator, critically acclaimed 11-time Emmy Award winner Ernie Manus. And this program will, of course, conclude with very special remarks from the Honorable Joanne King Herring. Today's event would not be possible without the vision, leadership, and courage of Mala's chairwoman, Maha Khan. Yay. We all convened together because of her passion, steadfast ambition in making a difference, a real difference, and commendable strength wherever she is in this world. Maha, thank you for always serving our community. This truly is an understatement. So today's program will begin with remarks from Imran Igra, a leader in the Pakistani American community, and he has also been integral in making this event happen. So thank you for joining us today, Imran, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Zainab. You said so many things about me in one sentence. Even though she blamed me to be the integral part of this event, I am not. Everything today that happened is only because of two wonderful women. One is Maha Khan and the one is Zainab Khan. Please, a round of applause for both of them. Congressman Tony Esposito. Congressman Tony Esposito was supposed to be here today to honor the event. However, everybody knows today marks the 22nd anniversary of the horrible events of 9/11, and he happens to be, along with other congressmen and legislators, with the victims of the 9/11 families at the 9/11 Memorial downtown. So I asked him on behalf of the organizers that event is significantly more important. You need to show your support there, and we can be okay without, it's fine. But however, he also delivered his message of full support for the stability, economic stability in Pakistan. His office also offered full support towards the Pakistani American community. He happens to be the congressman from New York's District 4. And he's looking forward to working alongside Pakistani American community in finding the solutions for the problems and challenges that Pakistan faces today. Thank you very much.
So our conversation today will begin with remarks from Avishan Bhushan, Chief of Information Management Unit, Office of the Director of Coordination and Shared Services, Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs with the United Nations.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Maha. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this event on fundamental pillars of democracy organized by the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, MALA, as a side event to the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I'm honored to speak to you today about the importance of the work of MALA and its support to the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs. MALA is a proud NGO member of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. As Zainab mentioned, founded in Chicago in 2015, MALA has grown into a national organization mobilizing next generation leaders in the Muslim community across the United States by sharing their stories, celebrating their heritage, and building bridges to overcome divides. Mala has hosted over 250 virtual and in-person events across the nation, promoting the values of the United Nations for an equal and just society through social responsibility. Mala has actively contributed towards the Sustainable Development Goals through conferences and events hosted in thematic appreciations towards the work of the United Nations. Mala has been active in implementing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in the national community. Mala particularly focused on Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is gender equality within the United States by reducing inequalities and maintaining peace and justice for strong institutes. In cooperation with the UN bodies, every year Mala has been a part of UN Commission on the Status of Women, hosting an NGO event in New York focusing on various themes of gender equality. Mala has also partnered with UNICEF USA for interfaith events focused on safeguarding the rights of women and children. Mala also participated yearly in International United Nations Day, as well as UN General Assembly for side events similar to this one. Mala has launched Muslim American Heritage as an effort to promote diversity, inclusion, and address various topics that are impacting our community today. The Muslim American Heritage Celebration was created to help promote public appreciation of Muslim Americans, the diverse contributions Muslims have made to the United States culture and progress. The program provides resources for school, civic groups, congregations, and even individual families to celebrate the accomplishment of Americans of Muslim heritage and the fundamental freedoms that have enabled United States to thrive. Muslim American Heritage is an observance to Sustainable Development Goals through arts and music festivals, salon-type events addressing human rights, various awards and scholarship contests for Muslim American youth, screenings of film by and or featuring Muslim Americans, and creating a digital library of Muslim American heritage, as Zainab talked about. It's a moment to recommit to a vision of the future that ensures no one is left behind. And I emphasize, no one is left behind. Fundamental shifts in commitment, solidarity, financing, and action must put us back on track to end poverty, realize just societies, and rest a balanced relationship with the natural world and our planet. The SDG Summit will also be followed by the Summit of the Future in 2024, which will build upon the outcomes of the SDG Summit and turbocharge the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The panel discussion today will provide a framework of best practices for civil societies and NGOs across the globe to accelerate their progress towards achievements of SDGs. And it's with pleasure and honor for me to welcome the speakers and panelists today for participating in the fundamental principles of democracy. If I may go ahead and introduce our speakers and panelists, Mr. Ernie Manus, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Elizabeth Horst, Ambassador Robin Raffel, barrister and author Dawood Ghaznavi, and the Honorable Joan King Herring. Thank you and welcome.
It's a really distinct pleasure to have Ernie Manus with us. He's an 11-time Emmy Award winner, TV anchor, producer, and host, known for the Houston Public Media produced series, Interviews with Ernie Manus. And he is the co-host to Susie Orman on her biannual PBS specials and holds the title of Ultimate Interviewer from the Houston Chronicle. Ernie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly an honor.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to jump right into our discussion. You've got wonderful bios on all of our panelists, so you can look deeper into who they are and why they're here. But today's focus is on the relationship between the United States and Pakistan in regards to the fundamental pillars of democracy. So to start us off and to give us a look back at the history and the issues we are dealing with today, please welcome author, activist, scholar, and independent movement leader, Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to give my greatest thanks to Mala. I would like to rephrase names from here. Founder Zainab Khan and Chairperson Maha Khan for this parallel event with the UN. And then my very honorable guest speakers. First, PDAS Elizabeth Horst, and then Ambassador Robin Raphael, Avishan, Senior Official, United Nations, which we heard before, and Honorable Joanne King Herring. It's been really an honor to be here. I will give you my 5 points of recommendation in which I believe that if we implement them, I really believe that we can have a very strengthened democracy, and at the same time, US and Pakistan relation will be strengthened. I love United States to be part of so that we can go back to our basis, which is the core democratic values of Pakistan. So the first point which I put forward is political stability. What is political stability? Political stability is that if the constitution mandate is that the election should be held after 5 years of any government, so the election should be done within 90 days, what is happening in Pakistan now. And I really, really appreciate American ambassador to Pakistan that he is very keen and he has visited many Pakistani institutions. I mean, he met the Prime Minister, he met the Election Commission of Pakistan, he met Punjab Chief Minister, and he's very much keen to have a free and fair elections in Pakistan. And that's very applauding. I really applaud that. Secondly, Pakistan and United States have to re-establish a security pact. Because what is happening from Afghanistan again is really, really impacting Pakistan. Not only just because our people are dying, ideologically. I mean, these people, they don't believe the idea of Pakistan. They don't believe the systems of Pakistan. Our soldiers are dying every day. It's very horrendous that a country which have 2,200 kilometer border, so everybody's dying. And in Chitral recently, there was an operation going on. So I really believe that we have to re-establish a pact with the United States from because of the terrorism from Afghanistan coming in. So that's another issue which we need to deal with America. The third one is economical stability. I mean, I'm so happy that IMF is playing its part. It's helping Pakistan to revive economy, but IMF is not a very permanent trajectory. We need to open trade initiatives with America. I mean, I had my talk recently in Baker Institute, and it came to know that 55% of Pakistan workforce is in agrarian land. We need technology in agriculture products to be more strong and more growth and more quicker way. So I think in agriculture and in energy sector, I think we really, really need technological side from America to have a stronger growth. So that's one of the other aspects I would like to, United States to work with Pakistan. Because, if you have more middle class, the more prospect you will have to have a stronger democracy. This is how it's going to work. And the fourth point, which I would say, is rule of law. It's very sad that my own personal institution, Supreme Court, has been split. And you can see the orders of Supreme Court went into the air. Nobody is ready to listen to the Supreme Court orders. This is a very bad state of condition and very bad state of position. Even we not going to have political stability in Pakistan. I think if there is going to be no rule of law, then all those fractions and all those groups which want to use Pakistan for their own personal interests, they gain more grip in the society.
So we need those factors to be considered, that the more we're going to have stable government in the coming years, the more we can control these institutions. And finally, I believe that people-to-people relationship with US and Pakistan, which has a very high significance. I really thank America to help Pakistan recently in the COVID section, then in the polio, and then a lot of work have been done by USAID in health, education. Sometimes I believe that if you guys doesn't have 501c3, God knows how many organizations in Pakistan will survive, because a lot of money goes from United States because of very lenient, laws for charitable events in America. So these are the 5 points. I believe that if we work with the United States on these issues, I believe that not only Pakistan, but the region would prosper. And I believe that it's in a very strong US and Pakistan interest that democracy in Pakistan should prevail, should get strengthened, because people of Pakistan, here, they are very much integrated in American society, very successful people. I think we want these type of people to grow over there as well and have a very healthy relationship with the United States. I hope I have covered everything which I saw, which I experienced, and I've lived with. I am so thankful to you.
Our next speaker, we're pleased to have with us Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Pakistan for the Bureau of the South and Central Asian Affairs for the State Department of the United States. Please welcome Secretary Elizabeth Horst.
Deputy Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asia, also responsible for Pakistan. And first I want to thank Mala for bringing us all together for this wonderful event. I want to thank our opening speaker, Dowd. You gave us a lot of food for thought. I'm going to keep my remarks short and focus really on where the United States and Pakistan relationship is right now, because I think we're at an interesting inflection point where we're writing a new chapter. And I don't need to tell the people in this room that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship has had a lot of ups and downs. It's been a very complex relationship. But I'm actually very optimistic when I look back over what we've accomplished in the last 12 months, that we are indeed writing a new chapter that isn't a high, that isn't a low, that is right in the middle, where we're two big countries with common interests that are working on a lot of complicated global issues together. Like normal big countries that have relations with each other, some things we agree on, some things we have to work through. But I'm confident that if we can weather a few of the coming crises, we're going to find that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is really an engine for stability and for growth, not only for the region, but also for the world. So let me talk a little bit about where we are right now in the moment. I think I'm pleased to hear you mention Ambassador Don Bloom, who's been in Islamabad for about a year and a half now. With his arrival in Pakistan, we were really able to turn the page, I think, on U.S.-Pakistan relationships. That and the U.S. and NATO forces' departure from Afghanistan allowed us to look at the relationship with Pakistan really just for what it was, a bilateral relationship. And so I'd like to divide it into some of the areas that I think we're all concerned about, which is the economy, security, and the political relationship. But it's in the economic area where I see the most progress if we can get through some of the crises. Those of us that have friends or family in Pakistan know that the economy right now is in a position that it hasn't been maybe ever, and it's of a big concern. But there's plenty of bright spots, and the United States has really invested in a lot of where we see potential in Pakistan. We have something called the U.S.-Pakistan Green Alliance Framework. And this is something that's a forward-looking, transformative initiative that recognizes that climate change and green energy are the key to the future with Pakistan. And so this U.S.-Pakistan Green Alliance Framework is looking at clean water, smart energy, smart agriculture, and clean energy as a way to take all of the talent and the energy and the resources in Pakistan and move it towards a future-oriented economy. And we're doing a number of things in that sphere. Dowd, you mentioned the IMF. We all know, those of us who have been watching Pakistan for a long time, that Pakistan has a long relationship with the IMF, and the standby agreement right now has given a little breathing room. But it is critical that Pakistan stay the course on the reforms that are not just from the most recent IMF program, but have been there almost as long as I've been working on Pakistan. That includes energy sector reform. That includes investing in energy infrastructure. That includes widening the tax base. And all of those things are very common sense issues that the IMF has prescribed for Pakistan that the United States stands behind. Because we know if those conditions are in place, that's when the United States can really with confidence say it's time to start investing in Pakistan. When we have the conditions in place that make sense for Pakistani and US businesses to be trading with each other, investing with each other. Pakistan is a source of so much extraordinary human talent. The engineers, the inventors, the coders and others are all in Pakistan who could be contributing to Pakistan's economy and the global economy. But without the right business climate, that potential is not going to be tapped. So that's where we are on the US-Pakistan economic side. And I want to just also note, in the last year, we've done a number of dialogues that are really setting us again to write a new chapter. We had the US-Pakistan Trade and Investment Framework Agreement. First time in 7 years that the United States trade representatives sat down with their Pakistani counterparts and talked about what we need to do to restart the trade relationship. We had a climate and energy working group that again focused on what's going on in our US-Pakistan Green Alliance. And then we did an energy working group focused on many of the energy things that I talked about, looking at how US know-how can come and help Pakistan and make sure that Pakistan is ready to mitigate the climate issues that are out there. I want to, before I switch out of the economic issues, I want to talk a little bit about the floods. And I think last year's devastating flooding that anyone who saw the pictures of people sitting by the sides of the road who had lost everything, animals, fields, barns, homes, no one was left untouched, including in America. And the United States government was able to come up with a very substantial pledge, and we led the way that led to a successful pledging conference in Geneva. But the government's generosity was matched by many of you in the audience and the generosity of Pakistani Americans here who saw the floods and said, I've got to do something to help. And it's that kind of generosity and people-to-people contact that I think are so essential to building the economic relationship that we're going to see between the United States and Pakistan. Let me turn a little bit to security. Everyone looks at concern at the security situation and the threat that the TTP poses to Pakistan right now. We've had a security dialogue with Pakistan. We've had mid-level defense talks, and it's something that we are going to continue to look at, a counterterrorism dialogue as well. We know that without security, there is no stability in Pakistan, and we recognize that together we need to work on that. And then finally, on the political side, the United States remains a friend of Pakistan, a supporter of Pakistan's democracy. We have made it very clear we support no person, no party. We support the people of Pakistan having the right to choose their next government. Ambassador Bloom has delivered this message. We meet with all parties, all institutions. I have delivered the same message. It is critical that the people get to decide and that the political parties are responsive to the people. So we will be continuing to support Pakistan's democracy in that way. We want to see credible elections according to the laws and constitution. We want to see elections that are free of violence, have open competition, and have a free media that can cover them, because we all know that freedom of the press is essential to a healthy and flourishing democracy. But democracy also goes beyond elections. And that's why our friendship with Pakistan includes having really strong conversations about freedom of religion and how the blasphemy laws are used, how Ahmadis are allowed to worship, how other religious minorities are treated. And that's an important part of Pakistan's flourishing democracy. So we'll continue to deliver those messages. So those are the three parts that I think all of us are looking at: the economy, the security, and the political situation. But at the same time, I remain an optimist for what the U.S. and Pakistan can do together. And the United States is going to remain a friend to Pakistan through all of these troubles. Thank you.
Secretary, and last but far from least, with her unique understanding of Pakistan, U.S. policies, the issues, and all the players gathered from over 40 years of experience in the U.S. foreign affairs agencies, please welcome Ambassador Robin Rafo.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Mala and thanks to Ernie for the introduction. As you all know, I'm a long-term advocate of better and more grounded U.S.-Pakistan relations and a greater U.S. appreciation of the need to actively promote a stable, integrated South Asia region. While I worked for many, many years in the U.S. government, I don't presume to be close to U.S. internal policy discussions now. That's very much Elizabeth Horst's purview, and I think she described very well the U.S. government positions. So the observations that I will share will be my own. I have tried very hard over the years, as is a diplomat's role, to understand Pakistan's perspective and to explain as best I could how the U.S. saw Pakistan. This has meant being honest and at times critical, and as gracious as possible in listening to Pakistani colleagues recite a litany of complaints about the U.S. We are now in a period globally where institutions of democracy are being challenged. This is also true in the U.S., but Pakistan is no exception. Pakistan today is facing an unprecedented array of existential challenges to political stability, constitutional order, economic viability, and internal security, as the other two speakers have highlighted. Some of these crises are of its own making, but some are due to factors beyond its control, like climate change and the pandemic. But the combination of these interlinked problems would challenge the bandwidth of any government and leave the public at large frustrated and disillusioned with their leaders and looking for someone to blame. All the more reason to step back and take stock in a rational, dispassionate manner. On the economy, many analysts have said at the heart of Pakistan's problem is that over the years it depended on geopolitical rents. That is, generous development aid and military aid and Western-supported IMF loans premised on its geographical location, rather than on its own economic productivity and revenues. It was compensated for being a U.S. ally in the Cold War, helping drive the Soviets out of Afghanistan, facilitating U.S.-China rapprochement, and again supporting the U.S. in the Afghan theater of the global war on terror. Pakistan has been slow to adjust to the fact that the world is changing. The U.S. focus has shifted further east with its Indo-Pacific strategy and competition with China, undermining the value of Pakistan's real estate. Pakistan can no longer depend on a steady flow of aid, and political instability, as Elizabeth has noted, discourages foreign investment. The PTI government tried to redefine Pakistan's economic model to base it on geoeconomics rather than geopolitics, with Pakistan serving as the hub for trade and energy corridors from East Asia through Central Asia and on to Europe. Unfortunately, this idea was not fully developed, let alone implemented, before the PTI government fell. So now, Pakistan has no choice but to do the serious reforms that should have been undertaken years ago. Everybody knows what these are. Elizabeth has listed them, but I shall as well. You need to increase taxes on the feudal and industrial classes, end special treatment for uncompetitive industries, privatize key state-owned enterprises, institute land reform, and depoliticize and modernize the bureaucracy. An example of the absurdity of the current system is that many Pakistanis today cannot afford to pay their skyrocketing electricity bills. These are mandated by the IMF, so the government has no choice but to impose them. But at the same time, the elite sit on billions of dollars of urban real estate that is hardly taxed at all. So there's little revenue to subsidize the poor in their electricity bills because there aren't enough taxes being collected from the wealthy. The problem, of course, as we all know, is lack of political will. Unfortunately, the current efforts that the Army is taking to rescue the economy through selling assets to the Gulf is only a short-term fix. The long-term solution of real reform requires a government with a mandate from the people to make the hard decisions for long-term economic revival. Without such a mandate, reforms are easily undone by the next government. Some argue that such reforms will not be possible without major social upheaval. I would like to believe that Pakistanis will see the handwriting on the wall and that the wealthy Pakistanis will contribute more of their private resources to support the public good. On the political front, Pakistan was disadvantaged early on by the death of Jinnah, as Dawood mentioned. This left no counterpart to Nehru on the India side to guide the early development of Pakistan's democracy. The military, still the most organized and disciplined institution in Pakistan, intervened when it grew impatient with the politicians for one reason or another. Unfortunately, this history is now repeating itself. While there has been no formal coup, the military is clearly orchestrating events. When I look at the situation from, say, 30,000 feet, I see that there's more than enough blame to go around for the current chaos. The vote of no confidence did not work out as planned. The opposition PTI got too cocky and boisterous in its rhetoric and its street power. Everyone provoked everyone, and the result was violent rioting and the destruction of property, and then an unprecedented crackdown on democratic norms of freedom of assembly and freedom of speech and rule of law. Again, I believe that all parties share in the blame for the current state of affairs. But the only way for Pakistan to get out of the deep hole that it now finds itself in is to schedule elections and let the people know that they will have a voice in choosing who will represent them. It is essential that all parties be allowed to contest an election. Now, while many argue that the constitutional requirement of elections within 90 days of the resignation of the previous government is an immutable clause in the Constitution, I think reasonable people could manage a compromise that gives a bit of time for the delimitation of constituencies under the new 2023 census. But the temptation to think that a long-term technocratic caretaker government can fix the economy and realign political loyalties is probably a fantasy. The key point is that while the Pakistani public, like most publics, can be fooled by rhetoric or various forms of patronage for a short time, in the end they know when their voices are not being heard and they begin to demand change. That is the point at which democracy really comes under threat. Hopefully, wiser heads will prevail in Pakistan before that stage is reached. Now, how should the U.S. respond to the current chaos in Pakistan? As Elizabeth noted, U.S. relationships with Pakistan have waxed and waned over the years. But Pakistan, despite its current challenges, has an important history with the U.S. which should be respected. It remains an important country given its location, its size, its enormous natural and human resources, its economic potential, its large army, and last but not least, its nuclear arsenal. The U.S. has interests to protect in Pakistan and therefore needs to maintain a predictable, mutually respectful relationship based on frequent, honest communications with all stakeholders. I was pleased to hear from Elizabeth of all the U.S. efforts now to reestablish the relationship with the U.S. through all sorts of sectors. I think this is very, very good. It looks to me, though, like the U.S. has been trying to learn its lesson from the recent unsuccessful efforts to change internal situations in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. Therefore, it has deliberately exercised restraint in not commenting publicly on the situation in Pakistan. But given the long-term U.S. relationship with Pakistan, its words still weigh heavily. So the U.S. needs to carefully consider the consequences of action or inaction. By appearing not to recognize the depth of the political crisis and the resulting abuses, the U.S. risks being seen to condone the massive arrests and constraints on the media and the interference with the judiciary. This is bound in the long run to affect U.S. standing both in Pakistan and among the various countries in the global south that the U.S. is trying to cultivate. Now, I'm confident that in time, U.S. officials are recognizing this and adjusting and correcting course. But it's still very important to recognize that the U.S. needs to make some of its key concerns about Pakistan more public, not just in diplomatic channels. Thank you very much.
Start with, in listening to what we've heard so far today, I'll start with the ambassador on this one. Can Pakistan move toward a solid, fixed democracy without input from the U.S. or other major powers?
The short answer is yes, but that to help accelerate it and to assist the parties that are working towards that in Pakistan, I think it is helpful that outsiders carefully but publicly support the people who are working towards democracy.
Barrister, your thoughts?
It's very interesting, maybe historically, that in 1950s, one political scientist Pakistan had to be taught how to run the democratic culture and structure in Pakistan. I think the experiences in Pakistan has been so immense that people know. Like I'm a very big admirer of Brzezinski, his school of thought. The way he said that in 21st century people are politically aware. That's the biggest change. People know how to raise their voice. And I think in Pakistan, the exaggeration of the situation is that people want to speak out. That's why you see social media. Pakistani social media is the third most active around the globe. And what you talk about over there is just one simple thing, politics. In America, you talk about culture, Hollywood. But in Pakistan, you talk about politics.
Can you build on and create a stronger democracy without holding an election?
I am building a political party right now. I really believe, because I started my career with the Supreme Court. I've studied, how development of democracy has happened through the decisions in the Supreme Court. Whether you take America, the biggest decision, Al Gore versus Bush, that changed the dynamics of America. If you would see from the decision that they're not going to go, because biggest problem in Pakistan is rigging. You get the elections, but the next stage is rigging. So the comfortability of the mind of people is very important. And nowadays, what people of Pakistan is, what I see from very close eye is, they just need one simple suggestion, and that is, what do we have to say? And that's very important, that it needs to be respected. And that's what I think,
Secretary, let me ask you this. Of course, we understand there are many factors that are involved in U.S.-Pakistan relations. How do we build toward a stronger partnership while still supporting the growth and strengthening of their democracy?
So we have never hesitated from supporting democracy, and even to your earlier question, the best time for Pakistan's democracy to grow is because the Pakistani people want it to grow. Democracy never works when it's imposed from the outside. And so our stance is really, again, as I said in my comments, not for any particular party or position, but for fundamental principles that apply not only in Pakistan but around the world. And we've been really clear about that. But at the same time, it's a little bit damned if you do, damned if you don't. If we come out too loud or too strong, then we're accused of interfering. And recently, Ambassador Bloom went and met with the election commission, the election commissioner. And he was criticized for that. People were saying, oh, we know who pulls the strings on that one. And it was a normal conversation, which what normal diplomats do around the world. We meet with officials, and he was going to reinforce our support for Pakistan's democratic crises. So we walk a fine line on showing our support vocally and defending our values, while also not wanting to get sucked in or being accused of tipping things one way or the other. What we're going to continue to do is what we've been doing all along, is support a lot of the fundamentals of Pakistan's democracy, and that includes civil society. We've put $9.7 million in the last year into supporting freedom of media, civil society groups that are apolitical. Does not matter what party, so that the institutions are strong. And that's something that I think is the United States' best brand. And then we walk away and we say, Pakistanis, it's up to you to decide what kind of government you want and how you want it to work.
And jumping on the end of that, Ambassador, as soon as money plays in the subjects, where the money goes can be perceived as how we're influencing things. How do you balance aid, help, support, investment without being mischaracterized as selecting, choosing, and guiding a nation?
Well, I think Elizabeth has just made a very good point that our aid, particularly to civil society and in aid of institutions in Pakistan, really is intended to be apolitical. You know, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you can participate. But I do think historically there has been a problem where the majority of our assistance went on the security side, went to the military, and that distorted things. Now, I will say that in the mid-2000s, in the midst of the Afghan war, when President Obama came into office, we had what many of you will recognize, the Kerry Lugar-Berman economic assistance package, which in many ways was designed to balance the large military assistance to demonstrate that the U.S. cared as much about the people as they did about the military. Now that particular effort has a checkered history in terms of what we were able to do, but the intent was to show a balance, and I think that was really important.
At this point, how do the Pakistani people, do you feel, view, I guess views the wrong, what is it that they desire from the U.S. to help toward this goal?
I would love to share you one very small incident. 2 years ago, I was in Islamabad because mostly this is where I live. And the United States put one head money on one terrorist. He said, dead or alive. So one Pashtun guy came up to me. He said, I have a very strong question to you. I don't work anything, but I'm looking for that guy. No, seriously. He said, I have a question to you. He said, if I find him alive, then I kill him. Would I be eligible for both of the money or just the one side? I'll be very honest with you. This is a kind of, and I felt very sad that the guy still had in mind to think about what he wants to do. I think in Pakistan, like she said, that he visited Election Commission of Pakistan. In my sense, like I've said, 75 years of history with the United States. It's not a new history. Both governments understand each other, administrations understand each other. Misconfusions has reached to the point where it has become violent. And you have seen recently how it has gone. And it's mostly political rhetorics. No any basis. That's the worst part. And this is what I'm sad about as a lawyer, that if you raise such a strong political rhetoric, you have to have basis for that, because it's damaged very strong relationships. I think people of Pakistan from the United States, because I live in a locality where mostly exporters live. They are in sports goods, they are in surgical instruments. They want to do business in America. Every time I come to America, everyone says, can you bring me a contract from the USA? This is how people are. I mean, this is the natural people you're asking me. I think what they expect from the United States the most is that they want to work with you guys. This is how I see the relation. Yeah.
So I think both Ambassador Rainfall and the barrister mentioned people-to-people being essential to what we do. And youth engagement is absolutely critical. And we have a long history of working with Pakistani youth in a number of ways. We send about 800 students and scholars to the United States from Pakistan every year. That's a huge number, and that means that our alumni network is about 39,000 strong. So that is a connection across generations, but also with the youngest generation. We've also provided English language training to about 24,000 young Pakistanis. Some of you might think, well, Pakistan's English speaking. Why would the United States come and speak English? Well, there's a disparity about who has access to English, and we're trying to hit those parts of Pakistan where there may not be English language programs if you don't have the money or the family connections to do that. So we're very conscious about engaging with youth. I mentioned the U.S.-Pakistan Green Alliance. What are young people around the world worried about today? The climate. They are worried about how we're going to get out of this climate catastrophe. And so we're trying to engage young people in terms of solutions. We are supporting women in STEM, so we have more women engineers. We just graduated our first cohort, and I'm going to get the name of this wrong, is a Women in Energy Scholar Program. And they went and studied this, so we have more women who can come back and help reform Pakistan's energy sector. So we recognize that getting it right with the youth is really important. It even goes to some of the fundamental things like food security. One of the most heartbreaking parts of the flooding was that there were so many young children under 5 who were tossed into malnourishment. That's where the United States really came in and tried to help with that. So across the board, we recognize children are the future. We know that, but particularly in Pakistan, where so many of the population is under 22, we know that we have to get it right, and they have to see the United States as a partner and a place where they can do business as well.
Ambassador, jumping on the end of that too, I'm curious, the whole concept of funding, supporting, helping in areas that don't look like the mission is democracy necessarily on the surface, and how supporting these other things, helping in times of flood, helping with education, actually is moving towards supporting democracy in the region.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the kinds of programs that Elizabeth has been talking about, education, energy technology, these kinds of things, which are basically apolitical, really help. Unfortunately, they don't get, and this is an age-old problem which Elizabeth will recognize, they don't get the publicity, and they're not registered in the public mind as much as we wish they were. And that's a very difficult nut to crack, so in my view, it's sort of better to spend the money on the programs than trying to publicize them. But they are there, and they are a crucial part of really helping the institutions, which, as I mentioned in my talk, are kind of shaky in many parts of the world.
In talking about education, talking about youth, we've heard the words diversity, we've talked about women's rights and all of that. Where is Pakistan, and this is for you, Barrister, Pakistan's position on a lot of these issues, and is there a feel that American, I don't want to say, the term that comes out is interference, and I don't mean that, American involvement in it, is kind of sharing American ideals onto Pakistani people, or do we actually match up on these from the common person's point of view in Pakistan?
Well, when it comes to equality, obviously we both share the same value. I mean, like in Pakistan, people like us who are working on a bigger scale, we never see such differences. I mean, this organization, Mala, is an example. And I tell my friends in the Pakistani community that what females can do in the community for us, to me as a man, we cannot produce such, results. So I think people like us, they do it. But the thing is that 70% of Pakistan population is in rural areas. That's what need to be understood. And 55% of the workforce is from the rural areas. And they have their own culture. Like I've said, that every province has its own thousands of years of history. So they are dealing their issues as a social issues very strongly. But people who have moved out to cities, they are all mostly practicing the values of equality, and this is how I see. Yes, there are minor issues of domestic violence, which is obviously everywhere it's happening. But you're right, we still need to work on those issues more strongly as well. We have to. It's not, yeah.
I've got a bunch more questions, but I know you have questions too, and we promised we would let your questions be asked throughout the day, and even yesterday, Imran was gathering up questions from the audience, and he is going to share some of those with us, and then we'll address those questions.
The speeches and the discussions and the comments of all the speakers and panelists that we have heard so far, I don't think there's any room for questions left. That's after you. But still, I think just to honor the people who ask questions, I'm just going to, I received a whole bunch of dozens of them, and there's a process that filters those questions just to make sure there's no redundancy. And I would like to thank Mr. Azim Amia from Geo News, Mr. Faik Siddiqui, who is a vlogger from the United States, Mr. Mohsen Zahir, Dr. Safdar Chadda, and Hafiz Chaudhry, who is the president and CEO of Vision USA. They have posed, their questions have been selected. The first question being is, what is the current status of Pak-US relations after President Biden's visit to New Delhi and G20 conference? Arnie, you're the boss. You ask, you decide who's going to answer this question.
It's very simple. They have not changed. And this is important to understand, is that we are dealing with Pakistan on its own, not through the prism of Afghanistan or India or China, but as a bilateral partner that we work with. We can have good relations with India, we can have good relations with Pakistan, and we can work on them better. Not a zero-sum game. It is something that we have been saying in a lot of parts of the world, but it particularly applies to this region.
The second question is relating to probably the regional security. It states that TTP insurgency is on the rise in Pakistan. It is a legacy of America's 20 years of engagement in Afghanistan. Will the U.S. do anything to check the resurgence of TTP and Al-Qaeda in the South Asia region?
I would argue that the rise of the TTP is not only because of the United States war. There are a lot of regional factors that led to the rise of the TTP, including support from other places that supported the Taliban at various points when the United States was there. At the same time, we very much support Pakistan's counterterrorism initiatives, and we have been clear with the Taliban also that their responsibilities under the Doha Agreement are that their land should never be a source of terrorism. And we take that seriously. We are in discussion with the Pakistanis about this as well. And I realize what a difficult situation this is, particularly for the policemen and the army and all of those in the front who are taking it, who are the ones actually taking the hits and the actual victims of this. This is not just a policy question, this is a real question for communities and people. It's one that I think we need to work on together because it is taking a human cost. And it's one we're concerned about.
Fabulous, fabulous. Then there's a question that states that what role can Pakistani diaspora in the United States play in fostering better U.S.-Pakistan relations?
Barrister, I'll let you start.
My third most important aspect was the economical stability. There are many areas, especially agriculture, which I would really love to work in the future with the State Department, that how we can build up the production of agriculture. I mean, 55% of the country's workforce is in agriculture, and Pakistan is one of the agrarian lands. So I really believe that overseas Pakistanis more strongly have to come up with the strongest issue which concerning Pakistan, rather than just being in fractionalisms, you know. So I believe that there are a lot of Pakistanis here who are from those cities in Pakistan which are really, really connected with the export businesses. I think they need to connect with the State Department. They need to explain them what kind of products, what kind of business initiatives they want to take with the United States. I think this is the biggest, at this moment, responsibility. This is how I saw Indian community has, you know, in line with the State Department in the past, and they have grown their business in technological side as well from 1960s, which we couldn't handle. I mean, we have the best IT experts in the Silicon Valley, Muslim Pakistanis. We could have done too. But we, as I said, the side of the country was pretty much on the national security side just because of the external factors at that time. But we still have time to get into the IT side. Because Pakistan have 60% of youth, you know, students or kids lesser than the age of 35. Very vibrant. Best universities in Pakistan. Whoever comes here, they excel in American universities as well. So I think we need to engage those youth to more economical activities. Let's get out from all these security issues strongly for the youth. give them a prospect to live and give them the avenue in Pakistan to live. Look at the way people are leaving the country currently. I mean, there are like 50,000 passports are made every day in Pakistan. There's a huge frustration in Pakistan. So overseas Pakistani biggest responsibility at this moment is that produce an avenue for those brothers and sisters in Pakistan so that they can live with dignity in Pakistan.
One quick thing, and that is simply invest in Pakistan.
The next question relates to that as well.
We didn't hear that, Becky.
I said, she said, invest in Pakistan. I said, and pay your taxes.
There you go. And the next question relates to that as well. So what is the single most important thing, this is from one of the Pakistani Americans as well, who's not a journalist. What is the single most important thing that government of Pakistan should do to improve the business and investment climate to attract both domestic and foreign investments?
It's not going to come as a surprise if I say that corruption is an issue. Right? Finding an effective way to deal with corruption that is fair across the board so that corruption is not going after one group and not another. That is the single biggest thing holding people back. It holds back Pakistani Americans from investing. It holds back American companies from investing. It makes doing business so hard. So find a way around the corruption where everyone plays by the rules.
And I would add, as I mentioned in my remarks, reform of the bureaucracy. It's very stolid and stodgy and to a degree corrupt in some cases as well, but also just is an old-fashioned bureaucracy which slows things down.
One last question, and there's nothing after that. Someone feels here in the audience that State Department has done immense amount of work for the people of Pakistan over decades. How come their work does not get recognized as much as it should? And what is it that what we can do to help bridge that gap and create better understanding among the two people?
There's a quote I used to have hanging above my desk that was attributed to J.P. Morgan. And it said, there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who get the work done and those who get the credit. Try if you can to belong to the first group because there's a lot less competition. And I think our work in the State Department is really about not getting the credit, it's about getting the results that matter for first and foremost U.S. interests. Because this is not charity work, this is really in how we protect U.S. national interests. Getting those things done and making sure that we're making the world a little bit better and a little bit more stable.
This was the question for me, by the way. Rifat Chugtai, who everybody knows, she worked with the State Department and the U.S. administration over decades, and we are honored to have her. She's especially flew in from Pennsylvania. Rifat, if you would like to come in for 2 seconds and ask your concern.
Imran, thank you so much, and thanks to the entire panel. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Robin and Dawood, good friends. I just want to say one thing, and that is that we as a diaspora need to stop asking US to fix Pakistan. We have to remember Pakistan is a sovereign country. Pakistan has to make its own mistakes and learn from the mistakes and move on. US can facilitate some things, but that is for Pakistan should make itself so strong that US should want to facilitate things with Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you. The former Honorary Consul of Pakistan is here with us. Many of you know her for her work lobbying support for Afghanistan. It's a story that's been told through book and film, Charlie Wilson's War, but you may not know of her love, work, and dedication towards Pakistan and the Pakistani people. So please, it's my honor to welcome Dame, Ambassador, Knight, the Honorable Joanne King Herring.
And thank you, brothers and sisters. I love you. Honey, if you're going to talk to me, you got to talk Texan and be one. And we just love to adopt you. Now, how did I get to you? That's the question everybody asks me, and I can certainly understand it, because they thought I was a bit of fluff, didn't know anything. What was I doing in Washington giving parties and talking about communism when I could? I was fighting for you with all my heart, but of course I didn't know I was going to get the opportunity to do it. So everybody says, okay, how'd you get there? Well, it's a very interesting story. My husband was chairman of a major oil company, and he was drilling all over the world. So Yaqub Khan, who was the ambassador to Washington, thought, well, let's get him interested in drilling in Pakistan, which certainly was very important and is important right now. You need some drilling out there. And we're sitting here with some Texans who are in the oil business, and we think that it's a great business because it's raised the level of our country in so many ways. We certainly want clean air. But first, I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm just going to tell you how I got to you. And that is my husband and Yaqub Khan became friends. So he asked Bob, who is, as I said, chairman of this oil company, we are going to appoint an honorary consul, but it's going to be more than an honorary consul. You're going to have to really help us and work with us and do things with us. And Bob said, well, I'd love to do that, but I'm in 26 countries, my company. I really don't have the time to give you the time you need. Why don't you take Joanne? Well, you can imagine what the Pakistani men thought of that. They thought that was about the worst idea they had ever heard in their whole life. She will do nothing but mess up everything, and we do not need her in Pakistan. But we need you. So if you think that would be a good thing, we'll take her and bury her. So off I went to Pakistan. Why is Pakistan still so poor? It never gets any better. And the people are hopeless because I went to the villages. I really went to every village. I went to villages that didn't have roads in and roads out. And I met the preponderance of the people in Pakistan. And I love you, Carl.
Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. Joanne, I wanted to personally thank you for coming. You always give us such profound and thoughtful comments. You have always given me strength and fortitude to forge through always. All of us in life have a passion that we have. And I always say, where there's a will, there's a way. And all of us can do it. If not in large steps, in very small steps. I'm here today because you give me so much strength for my aspirations, and you've always told me never leave any stone unturned. Fight for liberty, fight for justice, but do it in your own flair. This conversation concludes the very necessary points that we as Pakistani Americans can and must use our voices to influence profound social change. We carry this program on so that the next generation of American Pakistan youth are empowered to stand up against injustices and create a foundation where democracy is the bedrock of civil governance. These issues in Pakistan directly impact us here in the United States, as I can speak for our diaspora crowd garnered in this room. As a designated UN NGO representative from Mala and the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and as the chairman of the board, we will continue to work in challenging injustices and setting forth an example of leadership through integrity. Our work with the United Nations, the best is yet to come. The panel's comments and their thoughtful and intelligent leadership have left an indelible mark on all of us here today. I would like to thank our panel, P. Das Horst, Ambassador Rafal, Ernie Manous, Barrister Ghaznavi, coming from all the way from Pakistan. And I would like to thank all of you who traveled so far to be here today from New York and from all over America to support Mala and this very important panel today at the start of the United Nations General Assembly. God bless America and Pakistan and the fortitude for a most promising, prosperous, and beautiful future. That is the end. Y'all can go home.